Hello, welcome to my first podcast, or whatever this is. Podcast, not podcast, whatever. Anyway, while trying to figure out what I wanted to do for this first video, all I wanted to do was read or listen to scary stories, because that's very common with me, because I like scary stories. So then I was like, oh, why don't I just read scary stories for the first video? So that's what we're gonna do. I have a couple of scary stories from Creepypasta. I will link them down below. I'm reading on my laptop, so don't mind me staring down reading on my laptop. But yeah, my name's Devin. I'm really into creepy stuff. I have a daily vlog where not as creepy stuff goes on, except my life. So why don't we just jump on into it, as Philip DeFranco would say. So this first story is called The Hot Springs. It says it's an 8.95 out of 10 from 22 votes. So not bad, actually. It's pretty good. The estimated reading time is 19 minutes, so it might be longer because I'm reading it out loud. I guess it depends on how good I am at this. Hopefully I'm okay at reading stuff out loud. I kind of skimmed through it. I definitely did not read either of these stories all the way through, but I skimmed through them. I probably should have read them. Whatever. Anyway, let's get started. A couple of important things to note before I tell you about my experience. One, you are more than welcome to go check this place out for yourselves. Do a quick Google search of Diamond Fork Hot Springs, Utah, and you'll get hundreds of results telling you exactly how to get there. For those of you that are curious, it is about an hour and a half drive from Salt Lake City. Way too far for me. I would not, however, recommend that you go by yourself or at night. Another important thing to know is that where my experience took place and the land surrounding has a significant history, especially related to Native Americans. Unfortunately, most of the recorded history is about the exponentially bloody conflicts between these Native Americans and early settlers. Just a couple examples are Black Hawk's War, the Provo War, and the Walker War. I also wish it to be known that I'm quite fond of Native Americans and what I know of their culture, and I have absolutely nothing against them. In fact, I have several close friends that have a Native American's heritage. I do not mean to offend or accuse by telling my experience, and I mention this side note only because of the possible link between my experience and the various legends about so-called skinwalkers. I will provide the facts, and you can make of it what you'd like. That being said, the Diamond Fork Hot Springs are a gem nestled a good half-an-hour drive and subsequent hike up the canyon and away from the city. I had been there several times before my wife Kenna and I decided to take a Monday off and hike there again this past winter. The springs are quite popular during the summer, and they tend to draw a large crowd of college students, scout troops, and old men that are overly fond of publicly bathing nude. I had gone in the winter with my cousin several years previous, and at that point we had the springs to ourselves, so I convinced Kenna to take one of her days off to go hiking them with me. January 11th, 2016. We began our hike just before 1 p.m. thinking that this would give us ample time to hike to the springs, enjoy soaking for a couple of hours, and get back to the car before sundown. I'd hiked to the springs in the winter before and knew that each winter road is blocked off to cars well before the trails to the springs begins. This is due to snow, though honestly it seemed to me it wouldn't be that hard to go it wouldn't be that hard for a plow to go the additional 4-ish miles. I guess I forgot just how far 4 miles is when you're walking through snow and ice. Nevertheless, we walked through the gate. The road was still open to hikers / snowshoers and began our hike. We enjoyed ourselves and took breaks about every 30 minutes, each break thinking that the trailhead must be around the next bend in the road. I'm a hiker, I know all about hoping that it's the next bend. Shortly before our first break, I noticed a hole. A cave would be too generous of a term. In the side of the mountain to the left of us. It was obviously a man-made hole, as it was covered by a section of chain link fence, but it still perked my curiosity. It was only about 30 feet from the trail, so I told my wife I'd like to check it out, and she'd happily come up with me. Upon further investigation, we found that it was not much more than a boring hole. We used our flashlights to shine as far back into the hole as we could, but all we could see is some abandoned piping. After taking another 5-minute break, we continued on further into the canyon. We walked, and we walked. The time wore on, and much earlier than we would have liked, our feet began to ache. I was beginning to regret insisting that we go on this adventure when finally we turned around a bend and saw the bridge with the marks to the trailhead. With newfound energy, we rushed over to the sign with information about the various trails. At this point, it was about 3 o'clock, and I was beginning to become a bit concerned about having enough light to make it back before sundown. But we were already this far, and we weren't going to turn around before spending at least some time soaking in those springs. Plus, we had flashlights just in case, and on the way back to the car, albeit lengthy, was very straightforward. So we pushed forward knowing that we were well over halfway there. Our strength seemed to diminish at an exponential rate, which was concerning because we'd have over a 5-mile hike back to the car. But I knew that we'd make it back somehow, perhaps with more frequent breaks than on the way up. We soon began to smell the sulfur odor that was a surge sign that we were getting very close. We ended up seeing some bikers as we approached the springs. They were riding some of those fat bikes that have huge tires and are designed for the snow. We were happy to see them coming towards us, as this meant they were leaving and we would probably have the springs to ourselves. After letting them pass, we hiked another 10 minutes or so and finally reached the springs. I cannot explain how heavenly of a sight to behold those springs were. The combination of the milky blue water, the red rock with snow on it to our left and our right, the blue sky above, and the waterfall about 100 yards ahead were too much to take in at once. And best of all, we had it all to ourselves. We quickly stripped down to our swimsuits and hopped in. It felt incredible, truly like stepping into healing waters. We relaxed for a bit and our noses quickly adjusted to the sulfur smell. Unfortunately, our bodies also adjusted to the water temperature, and before long the water didn't feel as amazingly warm as it did at first. There are a few places between the first springs and the waterfall further along the trail where water bubbles out of the earth and flows into a pool of its own, so I figured I'd check out a couple of those other pools and see if I could find a hotter one. I managed to climb up the runoff of some of the other pools, thinking that this would save my feet from freezing. It did, but in the process my feet slipped several times on the mossy rocks and were fairly banged up by the time I reached the other pools. To my delight, those pools were significantly warmer, so I rushed back and beckoned my wife to come join me in those warmer springs. After a very brisk 30-second dash, we jumped in and I yelped briefly as I realized I may have jumped a bit too close to the mouth of the spring. We soaked and enjoyed ourselves for about an hour. We ate some of the chips and granola bars that we had packed, and I downed a good deal of cherry coke. Perfect drink for a hike, right? At this point, I had accepted the fact that for at least some time of the hike back, we would be in darkness and have to use our flashlights. From the springs, it was hard to tell just how much the sun had set, since there are mountains rising steeply to both sides, east and west of the sun, only visible overhead for about 5 hours in the middle of the day. Oh my gosh, it totally skipped my part. Hello? Sorry. Okay. At about 5 o'clock we decided we really needed to get going, as much as we were dreading the hike back, so we dried off, took a few pictures, and headed out. Shortly after beginning the hike back, I realized that my feet were immensely sore and that my legs were already begging for a break. I mentioned this to Kenna, and she mentioned that she was feeling the same. I could tell that we were both in a mood to complain, so I determined to try and keep the mood light and the conversation lively to distract us from our discomfort. Things got very dark very fast. We hadn't even reached the halfway point from the springs to the main road when we started seeing stars above us. With a couple of flashlights with us, but I figured we should put off using them as we could, since I had just grabbed them from my parents' house and I had no idea how long they'd last. I also hadn't thought to bring extra batteries. All was well though, as our eyes had adjusted to the darkness and making out the snow-packed trail wasn't too difficult. I could tell that Kenna was getting as tired as I was, so in an attempt to distract ourselves from the weariness, I asked her about a scary movie that she had seen with a friend a few days previous. As she told me the plot, I began to feel a bit anxious and jumpy, but nothing more than what would be expected. It was partway through Kenna's explanation of the plot, though, that I realized a surreal sinking feeling. It was as though my insides were being squeezed, and I was descending into a state of panic. I generally don't get overly scared when reading or hearing scary stories, especially if I know it's just a movie, but this was different. I determined that this must be due to our circumstances, being isolated in the mountains far from anyone else, with darkness surrounding us on all sides. From the beginning of the sinking feeling to the attempting to justify it and brush it off was only a matter of seconds. I hadn't realized it, but Kenna had paused her explanation and hiked in silence for those few seconds, then hastily wrapped it up and moved on to another subject. I was secretly glad that she had finished so quickly and figured that some discussion on a lighter topic would probably push out the overwhelming feeling of panic and paranoia that had overtaken me. It was about at this point I began to hear the whispering. There was a river that runs next to the trail and down about 5 feet in most places, and I tried to brush the noise off as it sounded of rushing river. I think they meant water, rushing water. The thing that made me especially uneasy, though, was that the noise wasn't just coming from the river to the left of us. It was coming from the right and from the behind as well. Kenna had gone silent again, and I hadn't paid much attention as I was quite distracted by the noises. They started out very quiet, almost too quiet to even notice over the sound of the river, and slowly grew louder. They never grew loud enough to completely get rid of the doubt that they were actually there, but I was sensing a change in Kenna's disposition as well. Shortly thereafter, she said my name, which nearly made me jump out of my skin, and my dog's next to me freaking out, and asked if I'd be okay taking a break. I tried to appear calm and said I would, though the feeling of panic was still as strong as ever. It seemed to scream that we need to get away from there right now. We sat down in the snow and didn't talk much. I think I mentioned something about how we must be getting close to the road, and that then at least we'd be on a wide paved road rather than this thin dirt trail. I didn't dare ask Kenna if she was feeling or hearing anything, in part because I didn't want to sound like the scary movie plot was getting to me, and more in part because I didn't want her to confirm that the weird stuff was going on wasn't just inside of my head. Unfortunately, the whisperings hadn't stopped while we were arrested, and instead they seemed to be more real than ever. I was getting antsy and again anxious to at least be making our way towards the car and surely to safety. I suppose it was more of a desire to be making our way from whatever was behind/around us. At this point, I began to shiver, and pointing this out to Kenna, I suggested we keep pushing onward. I knew that I wasn't too cold, at least not cold enough to make me shiver like I was. Put simply, I was overwhelmingly terrified of the darkness around us and what it contained. We hopped up and continued onward. All the time, I was hoping and praying that we would see the bridge marking the trailhead and at least make it off this dirt road and back onto pavement. I knew that we would have a several-mile walk back to the car after crossing the bridge, but there was something comforting about the thought of being on the wider road. As we came upon a rather steeper part of the trail, recognized it as a landmark that was very close to the bridge. I decided we should pull out our flashlights for this portion. I didn't want either of us slipping on ice or tripping on a root and falling into the river below, and among whatever else might be down there. We each took a flashlight, and I decided to go behind Kenna just in case she started sliding backwards. As we started climbing up, I looked down at the path and noticed strange tracks that the bikes had left in the snow. I also noticed some other strange tracks that were going around and over the bike tracks. It looked like a small party of people with bare feet had gone through with a pack of large dogs. My mind was trying to put things together quickly, but was struggling. Those bikers had been the only people that we had seen, but these foot/paw prints were certainly from people that had come after the bikers. Another strange thing was that these prints not only were on the trail, but were left deep in the snow to either side, seeming to go off in random directions. Some tracks came to the trail, others left it, and everywhere there were large paw prints mixed with the human footprints. At first, this came off as a relief to me. My first thought that there must be some very dedicated campers who decided to bring their dogs along somewhere close by. The thought of some tough, burly campers nearby in these forsaken mountains was like a ray of light to my mind. Then a point of confusion began to form, small at first, but then very concerning. Campers don't go hiking in the snow in bare feet, and this point was much too far from the springs for someone to be walking around without shoes. This thought process, from terrified to hopeful, back to terrified and concerned, happened within a matter of seconds. Kenna had stopped and turned to me and pointed out the prints in the snow as well. I tried to brush it off with a chuckle and, yeah, what the heck are these people thinking? But the look of concern on her face only confirmed that I was not alone with my worried thoughts. The panic was again overcoming me, and I wished more than ever that the whispering would stop. All I could say is, let's go, and we pushed on with even more determination than before. I kept looking behind us, every time expecting to see something following. Each time before I looked back, my stomach would do a flip, but not once did I see anything suspicious. We kept our flashlights on for the rest of our hike out, and at long last we saw the bridge ahead. We quickly crossed and without a word continued on the main road. Roughly 4 more miles and we would be safe and sound in the car. To my immense relief, the whispering seemed to quiet down now that we were on the road. My legs and feet were aching like the dickens, so I asked Kenna if we could take another quick break. She obliged, and I very quickly regretted making the suggestion. The river still flowed by the road, but it was not nearly as close as it was to the dirt path, and therefore didn't mask any sounds. At this point, the whispers, though quieter than they had been on the dirt trail, were very clear and undeniably existent. I stared back to the bridge, wishing that this maddening noise and accompanying sense of extreme paranoia would go away. As I looked to Kenna to see how she was reacting to the menacing noise, I noticed she had her head in her hands, seeming to be shaking. I put my arm around her shoulder and pressed my head up against hers, and as I looked down, I froze. The snow we were sitting on was covered in human footprints, along with those enormous paw prints. Again, there seemed to be no method or destination in mind for whoever or whatever had been stomping around here. I shined my flashlight with a shaky hand in each direction, trying to figure out where these things had gone. I followed one set of footprints that ascended up the side of the hill to our right and saw that the human prints ended and those huge animal prints picked right up where they had left off. I felt as if I was descending into madness. I wanted to cry. I began to feel angry towards these things. Was this some sick joke? I wanted to scream and call out these things to stop messing around and get on with whatever they were going to do to us. More than anything, I wanted this all to end. With hot tears stinging my face, and with this newfound anger giving me a boost of energy, I pulled Kenna up by her hand, and without a word we continued at a brisk pace down the road. I could not shake the darkness. This was so much darker than anything I had experienced. It was horrible and overwhelming. Even the stars above us seemed extremely dim. The darkness was pressing in all around us, above us, below us, and worst of all, it seemed to be inside us. Strange thoughts entered my mind, wondering what acts of evil could bring such a feeling to this place, wondering if we had done something to bring this upon ourselves. Was this some sacred place that we were trespassing on? Had we done something to offend these creatures? Whatever the case, I hated this area and felt I was beginning to give in to the evil ambient darkness that seemed to be consuming us. I wanted to give up. The thought entered my mind that embracing this evil might be the only way out. Kenna saved me from my own thoughts. Her sweet voice pierced my dark thoughts and halted this internal spiraling. She had stopped and softly said my name. After taking a second to recover, I asked how she was holding out. She pointed off to the right, towards where her flashlight was shining on a patch of juniper bushes. Again, that invisible hand seemed to clench my stomach and I froze momentarily. A pair of eyes were reflecting back at us. I tried to regain my composure, and after a few seconds I noticed that the eyes remained unblinking. I quickly realized that they were that of a dead animal. The awkward angle and lack of movement gave that away. As I continued to stare, I realized that this was not just a single dead animal, that there were 5 or so dead deer. And what made my stomach really churn was the amount of blood covering the large patch on the road. I turned away as the sight made me lightheaded and shifted my focus to the ground right in front of us. Again, the snow was covered in those cursed footprints, this time painted with blood. I'll spare you the details, but let me say it seemed that these creatures had enjoyed themselves immensely at this horrid spot, and that there were several trails of blood streaking the snow. Still focused on the ground, I led us forward and to the left around this horrible scene of carnage, averting my eyes from the worst of it. I kept expecting to encounter the smell of rotting flesh, but it never came. I guess the deer carcasses were too fresh and the cold weather probably helped that too. Soon thereafter, we passed a campground, a landmark that meant we were getting close to our blessed car. It was at this point that the hollering began. When I heard the first shout, a chill went down my whole body, and I felt sick to my stomach. This was an inhuman shout, and it wasn't far behind us. I looked back, nearly tweaking my neck in the process, but still, I couldn't see anything. It was indescribably terrifying. I wish that I could see something so at least I would know what we were up against. Anything I felt would be better than being kept in this state of knowing something was there but not knowing what it was. We hurried toward the car, our legs and feet protesting every step, and the hollering seemed to grow ever closer and louder. Every 20 seconds or so, I would quickly scan to the left, right, and behind. Each time I hoped that I would see something to relieve me from this deranging state of not knowing. Still, I was terrified to the core of what I might see. Finally, after hours of wishing we were here, we rounded a bend and saw our beautiful car. Never in my life was I so happy to see it. My moment of joy was cut short, however, as one of my brief scans of our surroundings. Upon looking behind us, I saw several dark figures moving slowly towards us. A few had their heads raised, and I wondered what I had been thinking when I had wished that I could see what those creatures were. Each of them were human-like in form, though they were unusually tall and walking on all fours. They were all covered in thick, reddish-brown hair and had bright red eyes that reflected perfectly in the dim light of my flashlight. I will never forget those eyes. What terrified me to the very center and still haunts me to this day is the expression they all wore. Each that had their head up was staring right at me as they slowly crawled forward, and they were each wide-eyed, wearing a toothy grin. It felt as if they were boring inside me with their stares, and I was certain we were going to die. At this point, I wasn't afraid of death. I was instead terrified of what the alternative would be once they caught up to us. I could see an excitement and a twisted joy in their eyes. And they were trying to play a favorite game of theirs, feeding off our terror. And oh, how I wished I could describe the blackness that surrounded them. It was a blackness that was felt as much as it was seen. It was horribly fascinating, almost even enticing. But those terrifying creatures were so vile that at no point did I consider moving even an inch towards them. Yeah, why would you? At this point, I nearly went berserk. Luckily, Kenna hadn't looked back yet and was marching faithfully on towards the car. When I finally unrooted myself from the spot and found my voice, I cried out to Kenna to run and not look back. I had caught up to her at this point, and she turned to look at me and possibly behind. I screamed, "Don't!" And she seemed startled by my state of near insanity. She looked forward at the car again, and we both sprinted straight for it, adrenaline overcoming weariness. We jumped in, slammed the doors. I fumbled with the keys and let off the clutch quicker than I intended, nearly killing the engine. The darkness seemed to be thickening by the second. As I unintentionally peeled out, flinging mud and snow all over, Kenna turned around and screamed. I looked in the rearview mirror and saw the creatures mere feet from our car. Their sick faces were ecstatic with excitement, and their wide grins made me shout and put the pedal to the floor. Soon we were zooming along the canyon about 40 miles per hour, very dangerous for such a small winding road. And somehow these fiends were keeping up with us. Everything about them was incredibly unnerving, from their horrible gallop to those perverted smiles. I prayed that we would reach a straightaway where we could go faster and perhaps by some miracle outrun these beasts. Out of the blue, the darkness seemed to lift. The stars shone more brightly than they had all night, and I was overcome with relief. I looked in the rear view mirror and saw those creatures, now far behind us, leaping up the sides of the hills to our left. My camera turned off. I felt that if we talked about it, we would solidify that it really happened, but I finally brought it up, and I was almost a relief to have it out in the open. We've told a select few people about this experience, and much of it is still quite confusing to us. We still have some questions that may forever remain unanswered, such as what in the world were those creatures? What did we do to warrant their pursuit? They were certainly the quickest creatures we've ever seen, so why didn't they catch up to us? What would have happened if we had tried to confront them? All we know is that there is a serious evil presence up in that canyon, and if you don't believe me, you know where to find it. Credit Tyler T. Good job, Tyler T. Tyler T. So, I don't want to say that was skinwalkers or, I don't know, werewolves? Maybe werewolves. But that was a good one. I enjoyed that. I would never ever tell anybody to ever hike that unprepared in my life, because that's how you die by natural causes, not even skinwalkers and werewolves. That's just how you die. Would not ever recommend people being so unprepared for a hike. Don't do it. Especially in winter. I don't know why. Who would even want to, I don't know. I would not want to do that in winter. Heck to the no. I wouldn't, I mean, they didn't even have snowshoes on. They were just like hiking, so. And then to go to Springs is like cool and all, but what? And then you get out of the water and then you're freezing because there's snow everywhere. I don't know. I personally would never do that. Also, apparently there's skinwalkers out there, so definitely would never do that. Very good story, though. I don't know why my camera randomly turned off towards the end of that. I'm hoping it's not like a timing thing. I have one more story I'm gonna read. Probably. Maybe I'll find a really short one after this one, but this is the other one that just kind of the first couple sentences stood out to me a bit, because this one seems like it'd be a little funnier. Maybe. Maybe a little more realistic, creepy, because just the title is The Space Above the Closet, and I definitely have two big spaces above my closets, so anyway. Ahem. My room is tiny. Of course, that's because it was built for efficiency. I don't know if you've ever stayed in a dorm room or even seen one for that matter, but I can tell you after having lived in one for the past 4 years, they're built like stackable sardine containers. My 5-star, luxury quality, thousands of dollars per semester individual dorm room measures in at a whopping 9 by 12 feet. I mean, it's practically a suite in the Hilton. You're right, sarcasm doesn't read easy in a diary. Diary? Journal? I'm a 22-year-old grown-ass woman writing in a notebook. It doesn't matter what I call you. You're still a goddamn diary. Haha. Goddamn diary. That's what I'll call you. Instead of dear diary, I mean. It'll be like my signature thing when anthropologists of the future find this and examine my precious words for cultural meaning. I'm sorry. I digress. Let's start again, shall we? Goddamn diary. As I was saying, my room is a tiny little shitbox, but that isn't the problem. Not really, anyway. Like I said, I've lived here for 4 years now, and if I'm being honest, it's not the size of my room that's bothering me. It's not really the room at all, actually. It's the space above the closet. The space above the closet. Jesus, how ominous. Wow, I feel crazy even writing this. I sound like some sort of nutcase. But I don't know, I guess I feel like if I write it all down, everything will make sense and I won't have to worry about it anymore, and I can just burn this stupid notebook, and then I won't have to concern myself with reminiscences about the anthropologists of the future, or if I should call you a diary or a journal or a fucking papyrus leaf. Honestly, I just need to write this down because maybe on paper it'll be sane sounding. I guess I should start from the beginning. Okay, well, right. The space above the closet. Remember how I said my room is roughly 9 by 12 foot? Well, it's arranged so that one entire 12-foot long wall is used up by bookshelves and a small desk. And on the opposite wall, there's a single bed. It's actually pretty comfy with a topper on it, honestly. Anyway, the closet is basically just a large wooden box that fills the space at the end of the bed and the wall where the door is. All of this is mostly irrelevant, except I can't explain the space above the closet without a clear image of how the room is set up. Now, the closet was built in such a way that it's not quite as tall as the room. As a result, there's a narrow space between the top of the closet and the ceiling. It's wide enough that you could store books there, I guess, or extra blankets or something, but nothing much more than that. I've never stored things there. It just never seemed right. I don't know exactly, well, now I have an idea. But when I first moved in, I just felt sort of like it was an inappropriate spot to keep any junk. This, of course, is deeply, deeply bizarre since I'm probably the least tidy person in the entire universe. No empty space is safe from the wrath of my book and DVD hoarding. Regardless, I never felt right putting anything above that closet. My first 3 years in this room passed without incident. I would live in it for both school semesters, pack up my things in April after exams, go home for the summer, return inevitably to the same exact room because the housing office at the university has zero interest in making things interesting. School would go on as school does. My room would get messier, I would accumulate more books, and the stack of written the night before essays would get higher. Oh, by the way, I'm a history major, philosophy minor, engineering dropout. I know, go me. I'm training to be a well-read and clever intellectual. I'll be happy to discuss Kantian ethics with you between grande, non-fat, mocha, whatever the fuck orders. Point being, I own a lot of books and I write a lot of essays. Anyway, one day a few weeks ago, I was in the middle of a very important Netflix binge when an annoyingly persistent knock on the door interrupted my nearly 9-hour marathon of The X-Files. I panicked, of course, because being me, I had completely forgot about the resident assistant that was supposed to be by for inspections, and my room was a certified disaster. I mean, full throttle, Sharknado 3D, empty wine bottles, stacks of crumbly dishes, probably tiny dead mouse bodies in the heat register disaster. And I mean, cut me some slack because I'd also just finished slogging through a backlog of something like 30,000 words worth of full of essays, and now all I wanted to do was eat Nutella toast and lust after Scully's hair color. So sue me. My immediate reaction was to just take the hit, let the RA come in, give me a dirty look, and then write me up for uncleanliness. But my deeply buried, ancient, evolutionary, uterus-owning, homemaker sense must have kicked in, and I have to say, I pulled off some kind of the Flash shit in that moment. And when the RA came in, she just said, "Cool, see you later." And that was it. No uncleanliness sanctioned for me. But to get back to the point, when I was in the middle of my miracle tidying frenzy, I didn't have time to be worried about the space above the closet and my uneasiness about putting things there. All I knew was that I had a lot of dirty dishes that needed a hiding place, and the closet space was it. So I stacked a couple bowls and some plates on top of each other, and I shoved them as far towards the wall on top of my closet as my arm would reach, so they weren't visible. All the rest of the clutter, including my nearly empty wine bottles, got spirited away into the drawers under my bed, and that, kids, is how all my socks got purple stains on them. Truth be told, I actually kind of forgot about those dishes on top of the closet for a while. When the RA left, I went straight back to my X-Files binge, and I didn't remember the dishes until the following morning when I woke up. Okay, it was afternoon. Don't judge me. Well, luckily that same day an urge struck me to tidy my room. Actually tidy it. Maybe with exams approaching, I felt like a clean room would make for a clean mind. Ha, right. In any case, I wanted a clean room. While I was deciding where to begin, I suddenly remembered the dirty dishes above my closet and thought that washing them off would put me right off to a good start. So I climbed on top of my bed, reached all the way back to where I had pushed the stack of dishes, and felt. I was confused. I stood on my toes and looked into the crevice. I even got a flashlight and inspected the space, although that was unnecessary because I could see all the way to the wall as it was. I shook my head, perplexed, wondering if I had already cleaned the dishes. Perhaps I had picked up a new habit, sleep cleaning. As convenient as that would be, it seemed unlikely explanation. Sleep cleaning or not, whatever the explanation, the dishes were undoubtedly no longer above the closet. I plunked down on my bed, thoroughly weirded out. Then I looked around my room, wondering if maybe I had already retrieved the dishes and simply forgotten about it. I mean, maybe too much Netflix really does burn holes in the brain. Who knows? But I didn't see the dishes anywhere. I checked my drawers too, and besides my newly wine-stained socks, no dishes were to be found. I left my room and padded barefoot down the hallway to the little communal kitchen where I looked through every cupboard, thinking maybe I had imagined the dirty dishes entirely, but none of my personality-labeled plates and bowls were around. Oh, and by the way, you'd be stupid not to label things at a university. That shit isn't just for summer camp. Labeling is serious business. I meandered back to my room, all the way quite literally scratching my head at the case of the missing dishes. If I were Mulder, I would have been thrilled about the missing dishes. An X-File in the making, but instead, I was just confused. So I did what every good university student does when a problem can't be solved. I decided to take a nap. Of course, as a fourth-year student, I'm required to occasionally appear responsible. As such, I set an alarm on my phone so that I wouldn't sleep longer than half an hour. Laid down on my bed, took one last weirded out look at that spot above the closet, and closed my eyes, only to be woken up by a huge crashing sound 15 minutes later. I jolted awake, smacking my head on the wall beside my bed and frantically looking around for the source of the noise. In that moment of panic, I swear I saw a quick, shadowy movement above the closet that could have been my imagination. What really mattered though, what really caught my attention, was the pile of broken dishes on the floor beside the foot of my bed. A pile that for everything in the world looked like it just was in the right spot to have been shoved from the top of the closet. What's more though, is that although those 2 bowls and a few plates were in shards, they were all impeccably clean. Not a crumb or butter smear or layer of dried milk to be found. That's disgusting. I know you must be wondering, goddamn diary, how does a person rationalize such an event? Well, let me tell you. As a proud engineering dropout turned art student and certified horror/sci-fi lover, a vague knowledge of dark matter theory combined with a philosophical mindset and a propensity for concocting creepy tales does not always a rational person make. Luckily, that same combination of characteristics meant I could refrain from spiraling instantly into crippling fear. I thought to myself, okay, so I just experienced some seriously weird physics, anomaly, generally creepy shit. But this is my zone. I totally got this. In fact, my first instinct was to ask myself, what horror movie is this from and how does it end? Because I was sure I must have managed to produce some paranormal activity using only the power of my imagination, a la The Apparition, or a la the Philip experiment if you want to go real life on that shit. I mean, if anybody could do it, it would be me. I've seen enough bad Hollywood ghost movies. But I can't deny that I was a little bit freaked out. At some point, my rationality did kick back in and I decided stupidly that I must have just somehow not seen the dishes earlier and they were like on the very edge or something and they just fell off the top of the closet? I ignored the fact that such an explanation made little to no sense, and that still didn't explain the fact that all the dish shards appeared to be spotless. But that tenuous explanation made just as much sense as me magically creating a creepy, dish-cleaning, top-of-the-closet dwelling ghost with the power of my mind. Then my phone alarm went off, and that of course startled me. A girl just can't catch a break when dishes are involved. Needless to say, I tracked down a neighbor who owned a broom, cleaned up the pathetic little pile of impecacy, clean but irreparably, I don't know why that was so hard, shattered glass, and went back to ignoring the space above the closet. But I had trouble sleeping that night. And the next. And the next. I had trouble sleeping for a week after that incident because I couldn't stop thinking about the shadowy crevice and the incident with the dishes. So a week and a half after what I now call the dish day, on a sunny Saturday morning when most other 22-year-olds were probably nursing hangovers, I decided to run some experiments on the space above the closet. The first test I did was with a piece of paper. Just a simple blank piece of printer paper with nothing written on it and no marks. I placed it on top of the closet and pushed it as far back to the wall as I could. Then I sat on my bed, started the stopwatch app on my phone, and waited. At 14 minutes and 22 seconds, the piece of paper was shoved from the top of the closet by some unseen force. Before it even landed on the ground, I bolted to my feet atop the bed to catch any mysterious culprit in action. By this point, I was thinking maybe rats were to blame? Again, unlikely story. But the crevice was empty. Disappointed, I retrieved the piece of paper from the ground and examined it. Nothing had changed. No marks had appeared. It was not torn. In fact, it wasn't even wrinkled or creased. I resolved to continue my experimenting. I decided the blank paper was kind of like a control and that I could use the same sheet at the end of my experimenting to try to make the whole stupid process a little bit more legit. So I set aside the first sheet of paper and grabbed another. This time I wrote something on it. Just my name in large black letters, all caps, across the middle of the page. Ripley. Yes, I am named after Sigourney Weaver's character in Alien. Compliments go to my mother. Once again, I placed the paper on top of the closet as far back as I could reach. Started the stopwatch app and waited. This time I stayed standing. I stayed standing for 23 minutes and 11 seconds watching that paper and it didn't so much as flutter. Exasperated, I flapped down on my bed. 2 seconds later, the paper flew off the top of the closet. I scrambled to retrieve it from the floor, and when I did, I was disappointed to find that it had not been altered. Not to be discouraged so easy, however, I decided to add something to the writing and try again. Hello, my name is Ripley. Once again, I positioned the paper atop the closet and started the stopwatch. At exactly 13 minutes, the paper fluttered from the crevice to the ground. It was writing side down when I received it. I turned it over. My writing was gone. And when I say gone, I mean gone without a trace. I had written my message in permanent marker and not a single spot was left on the page. Not so much as a faint shadow of lettering. In tiny, neat, penciled freehand, however, on the very bottom of the page were 2 words. I know. Well, I nearly completely lost my shit. I had no idea what to do. Prior to conducting my little experiment, I had every intention of continuing until I could find out what was going on with my closet crevice. But those 2 little words freaked me out so much that I simply grabbed my coat and my purse, threw on some shoes, and went for a walk to clear my head. Halfway around the block, I realized I had to go back. I had to dig deeper. I asked myself, what would Dana Scully do? Dana? Scully do. Scully. Well, she would investigate the occurrence as if it were a rationally explainable phenomenon until something undeniable led to her to believe otherwise. But Fox Mulder? Well, what would Mulder do? I bet if the X-Files were set in 2015, the first thing Mulder would do would go to Google paranormal phenomenon relating to closets. So that's what I did. I went immediately home, and all the while, deliberately avoiding any glances towards my mysterious closet space, I typed into Chrome, paranormal closet. Some results came up. The first result was a site dedicated to helping people come out of the closet by comparing the experience of realizing homosexuality to that of experiencing the paranormal. I mean, I've never had to come out of the closet, but the article was pretty convincing. There was also a Reddit thread entitled, Old Man in My Closet. I didn't click on that one. And a few YouTube videos, presumably shoddy attempts at special effects showing paranormal closet occurrences, but none of them resembled my invisible closet top dwelling companion, or whatever it was. After a few more attempts at various internet searches, I just gave up, resolving that I was on my own with this one and leaning heavily towards the Dana Scully approach. I would explore every option before writing it all off as a personally experienced X-File phenomenon. I would continue to experiment with this closet space, exchanging letters with the mysterious void. Retrospectively, maybe that wasn't such a good idea. Maybe the Mulder approach would have allowed me to forget that the dish day and all those in those 2 words, I know. Maybe Mulder would have just been able to chalk it up to bizarre, fascinating experience and let it go. Move on. But no, I decided to be Scully. I decided to push it. I grabbed the piece of paper with I know written on it and decided to keep it for proof. For everyone else, it was just like 2 words on a piece of paper, but to me it was solid evidence of my experience. I didn't want to risk losing it. I picked a 3rd piece of paper from my shelf and wrote on it, "What's your name?" I delivered the paper to the top of the closet, sat on my bed, and started the stopwatch. At 10 minutes and 35 seconds, the paper floated from the top of the closet, this time directly onto the bed instead of the floor. "Not important," it read. My writing was gone. I decided to use the same piece of paper for the next question. Directly under the closet being's writing, I scribbled, "Are you real?" At 6 minutes and 15 seconds, the paper landed on my bed, blank once again except for the answer, "Evidently so." I thought to myself, so the closet is a smartass then, and scribbled my next question. "If you're real, why can't I see you?" At the 4-minute and 21-second mark, the paper landed with response, "Ever seen Gravity?" I wrote, "Touché," and nothing else, wondering what the response would be. After only 3 minutes and 51 seconds, the paper fluttered back to me. "Do ask something interesting, please." A smartass indeed. "How are you doing this?" The response came at the 2-minute mark. "Ours is a special ability." Ours? There's more than one of you? After only 1 minute and 3 seconds, the answer was, "Unnecessary question. Ask another." I suddenly felt anxious. I had been at ease for the most of the process, odd as that may sound, but the clear eagerness of the demand, "Ask another," gave me pause. Should I continue? Was I getting into something dangerous? I began the process unconvinced that even one of the strange closet entities existed, and now I was being told by some invisible force that there may be multiple unseen beings living on top of my closet, communicating with me through a piece of paper, from which my own writing kept magically disappearing. I actually felt afraid. But I sent another message. I stupidly sent another message. "Who are you?" The answer this time was almost instantaneous. I barely had time to start the stopwatch app before the paper floated off the closet and landed before me. What I read there made no sense. It seemed such a bizarre answer to the question, and while I was staring at the page trying to get my brain to work, I felt a building sense of anxiety creeping from my toes to my ears, a tingling sense of danger building in my spine. Too late. First letter of each sentence. Read the solution aloud, please. I'll tell you who I am if you complete this task. It was the longest sentence the closet had returned. It was also the weirdest. Stupidly, I ignored my sense of mounting panic, desperate to complete the task and solve the mystery. "I am Scully. I am Scully. I am Scully," I kept chanting in my head. First letter of each sentence? I used to love those silly puzzle games. I racked my brain to remember the entire conversation, but after some scribbling, I recalled all of it. "Hello, my name is Ripley." "I know. What's your name?" "Not important." "Are you real?" "Evidently so." "If you're real, why can't I see you?" "Ever seen Gravity?" "Touché." "Do ask something interesting, please." "How are you doing this?" "Ours is a special ability." "Ours? There's more than one of you?" "Unnecessary question. Ask another." "Who are you?" "Too late." But when I was finished, I isolated all the first letters and the message didn't make any sense. "Hi, about." Total nonsense. Then it dawned on me. Maybe just use every first letter of the responses? After all, if there's a hidden message, how could I have... Then it dawned on me. Maybe, I don't know why my thing keeps turning off. Maybe just use every first letter of their responses. After all, if there's a hidden message, how could I have played any part in it if I didn't know it in the first place? I arranged all of the letters from the closet's response into a line. My heart sank. A lump rose in my throat. My palms started to sweat. I need out. I need out. For some insane reason, even though the message was already creepy enough that I should have stopped, that I should have torn up the page and gone straight to the housing office to switch rooms, some insane visceral urge to complete the task and a sweeping desire to solve the mystery overwhelmed me, and I read out loud, "I need out." The room instantly felt eerily silent. It seemed a vacuum had formed in my little dorm room. Simultaneously, all of the air seemed to be sucked away from my lungs, and a freezing cold seized me by the shoulders as I watched a swirling shadow gather in the space above the closet and spill over the edge into the room, spiraling and creeping toward me like an inky fog. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't move. I couldn't think. I could only sit there watching the fog approach me and engulf first my legs, then my torso, then my neck, and soon everything was blackness and burning cold and indescribable, painful silence. And then I woke up here in this void. Only this little notebook was here when I opened my eyes. I can't see my body, and I don't appear to have any corporeal form, or whatever. But I still feel like myself. I can somehow write this, and I can somehow see. When I woke up, I saw out into my bedroom from above, from on top of the closet. I saw a thing that looks like me, that looks just like Ripley. When it sensed that I was awake, the thing that looks like me climbed into my bed and peered into the space above the closet where I am trapped, and said in a voice that sounds like mine, but with different, stiffer inflections, "Hello, my name is Ripley. That's who I am. Now you have your answer. You're welcome for the notebook." I wanted to respond, wanted to yell that, "No, I am Ripley. You're not Ripley. You aren't me. I don't want this stupid notebook. I want you to let me go." But I couldn't. I could only write and presumably push things off the top of the closet, or make them temporarily disappear, or erase things. And now that thing from the top of the closet is walking around as me, and it's gonna keep up the pretense. So I'm writing this tale down, and maybe someday, when the fake Ripley leaves and someone else moves into the room, I will push this book off the top of the closet. And maybe that someone will start reading, think it's all a bizarre mishap, and maybe they'll become interested in my story. Maybe they'll be a thrill seeker willing to test the boundaries. Maybe they'll be a curious fan of the X-Files. Maybe they'll want to talk to me. Maybe they'll tell me their name. But I'll already know it. And my task will be to lure them, to trick them into saying that I need out. Credit to Emerald Lee. That was really good too. I liked that one. Very different. And very, I mean, at some point I kind of figured that maybe whoever was on top of the closet was related to whoever lived in the room, but that was really good. Yeah, I don't know why my camera keeps turning off though, so I'm gonna need to figure that out before my next podcast or video or whatever this is. But anyway, I will link these two stories down below. Full credit to the writers, obviously, because I did not write them, but they were really good. Maybe I'll do more of that, because all I wanted to do was listen to somebody read scary stories, and then I was like, well, I need ideas of what to do, so maybe I should just read the scary stories. So that's what I did, obviously. Anyway, thank you so much for watching. Please like, subscribe. I don't know how often I'm gonna post on here. I don't have a schedule made up yet. Probably pretty often though, because I don't plan on doing any crazy editing or anything, which is why I'm calling this a podcast channel, because I'm just going to be sitting here talking about stuff, whether it be reading scary stories or talking about mental health or you know, conspiracies, which I know YouTube is not a huge fan of, even though Shane Dawson can do conspiracies. Nobody else can do conspiracies, whatever. But yeah, this is just gonna kind of be where I focus on certain topics, certain stories. I will just go over, I plan on doing some true crime stuff. But yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed those two very creepy, very good well-written stories. My little dog is next to me. He was twitching half the time because he was asleep. I will show you guys. He is pretty freaking cute. He is the cutest little dog in all of the land. Yeah, that's all. Please like, subscribe, share. Go check out my daily vlog. I will link that in the description down below. Wow, talking. I'll see you guys next time.